In this video, I'm going to show a simple method to create a characteristic fade seen in some films where the relative neutral point shifts in color, often towards blue or cyan. This isn't a characteristic of film fades in general, but I think a byproduct of a specific process. I'll walk through my method, explain my reasoning, and provide another approach at the end. I'll start by changing the depth to 16 bits per channel. Command N to create a new composition, film fade example. 1998 by 1080, 24 frames a second, and I'll set the duration 100 frames. I need something to fade, so I'll create text. Command double click the pan behind button to center its anchor point, and align the text vertically and horizontally to the comp. I'll create an adjustment layer, name it film fade, and add curves and levels. Quick side note, while this method will use only built-in effects, I am going to use the FX console plugin to add the effects, which is free to download. Add a keyframe for both effects at 0 and at 32. And we'll go back to frame 0. For this iteration, I'll set the levels input black to 8000 and drop the RGB channel curve down halfway, the red channel down completely, the green channel down to the third line, and the blue channel halfway. I'll make a fade out as well by copying the first keyframes and pasting it on frame 96, and the second keyframes to 64. Then I'll ease into and out of this fade by right-clicking and choosing Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease In, and Easy Ease Out. So that's the whole method. It can be used with footage as well. I'll use this shot from Pexels as an example, scale it close to the frame size with a small margin. It has a nice look on its own, but we can approximate a few more film characteristics to help sell it further. I'll add an adjustment layer, name it Blur, add Fast Box Blur, set the radius to 0.2. Add another adjustment layer, name it Highlight, add a curves effect, and set a few points to round off the highlights. Add a null layer, name it Gate Weave, hit P to bring up its position, then option click the stopwatch to add the expression wiggle, which needs a frequency and amplitude, so I'll do 12 frames and half a pixel. Then I'll select the text and footage and parent them to Gate Weave. Next, I'll add some film grain. This could be done in After Effects with the add grain effect, but I have some scanned 16mm color film that I can use, which I'll put above all the layers and set the blending mode to screen. Add a new adjustment layer, name it Contrast, add brightness and contrast, and set the contrast to 45. And that's all I'm going to do for the film effects. These are a few example shots with the fade in use. All the footage is from Pexels. I varied the curves recipe shot by shot. When this characteristic shows up in film, there's a wide range of colors that the image skews towards, so I wanted to reflect that. I wanted to keep this effect fairly subtle, but you can dial in the look depending on your needs. There are a couple specific things that I'll go into. First, I'll say that this is a fully unscientific method of doing this. I'm only going after a perceptual approximation of this effect, not any kind of accurate reproduction. Part of why the curves transformation is so simplistic is because I want to keep the methodology loose while I'm still working on it. If anyone watching is familiar with film processing and knows why this kind of fade occurs, I would love to hear about it. I wanted to experiment with creating this look because I love how this effect looks. It feels like it has more weight, it's richer, long fades can feel mysterious, all of which is totally subjective, but often the things that play into our taste are happening on kind of a subconscious level. So it can be fun to identify some of them and play around with their characteristics. I'll break down my approach a little bit. If we turn off the curves and step through the keyframes, we can see levels is moving from a black input level where we're losing detail essentially to a point where it has no effect on the footage. If you look at examples from films, the lightest parts of the image, in this case, the text, almost feel like they're being eroded. So levels is really just for that one axis. With curves, I'll first remove the RGB channel transformation so you can see more of the color. And as we step through these keyframes, we can see how offsetting the starting white pivot point for the red, green, and blue channels creates this shift in color as we come up. You could do the whole transformation with curves or levels, but I wanted to separate these tasks to make them easier to adjust rather than having one complex overall adjustment. Another method for this fade is already available. Andrew Kramer's bold type project, which you can download. He accomplishes his fade with two specific curves. I think these look great. I'd be curious to know what he based his curve adjustments on. As far as my method goes, I wanted to have a process that was easy to adjust shot by shot, where I wasn't managing curves with multiple Bezier points. In the middle of making this video, I thought of another possible approach, which I can show quickly. My idea was to parent multiple parameters so you could control the transformation with one value, in this case, the output white. I'll quickly make this again to demonstrate. Side note for this one, the values I'm going to use will only work in 32-bit, so if you're trying to follow along, make sure to change your depth. I'll add an adjustment layer, name it. For this version, I'll need levels individual controls. Then I'll add a keyframe for RGB input black, output white, and red output white. Hit U to bring them up in the timeline. I'll parent the input black and red output white to output white. I'm option clicking the stopwatch here to bring up the expressions, but that's not necessary. Then I'll adjust the expression on input black minus this existing expression plus 1. So input black moves the opposite direction of the output white value. All I have to do now is set a starting keyframe with the value 0 and an ending keyframe with the value 1. Right click, keyframe assistant easy ease in. And again, that's the bulk of the effect. If you wanted to shift more towards blue and less a cyan, you can also attach the green output white to the RGB output white. Overall, I still prefer my previous method. Shot to shot adjustments are easier to do, and I haven't nailed down the right translation from output white to input black with this method. And at the moment, the effect is too strong. Thank you for watching. I'm hoping to share more of these one off videos where I get into specific topics that interest me, often to do with creative processes.